Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. This is a cool little blade that I've been carrying for a few days now. This is the Zero Tolerance 0350. Now, this blade and this video is thanks to Bradley, who was willing to let me borrow this for a couple days so I could do this review. And so thanks a lot for doing that. Just so you know, and so you know who are watching, I did not use this knife as hard or as rigorously as I would use my own knife, because if I break it, you know, damage the coating or something like that, it's not mine. So I was a little more careful with this. I did do a bunch of cardboard cutting, a bunch of wood cutting, and it's a great knife for that kind of stuff. I definitely see this as a good bushcraft knife. I'll talk more about that when I get into sort of the overall like usefulness and stuff, but this knife performed really well for the various things that I did with it. Just know that I wasn't as hard on it as maybe I would be with my own knife, and the review may reflect that a little bit, okay? So I just want to let you know I haven't used this for 6 months or something. It's not my knife, okay? So just want to get that out of the way. Now, let's get into size and weight, okay? This knife is 7 3/4 inches. It's 3 1/4 inch blade and 4 1/2 inch handle. Essentially, those numbers are off by, you know, a 1/16 of an inch here or there, but that's going to be close enough for our purposes. The cutting edge is exceptional. There's a good 3 5/8 of an inch of cutting edge here, which is awesome for the size of knife that this is. Does really, really well. The weight on this is 6 ounces, give or take, you know, a fraction of an ounce, 0.1, 0.2 ounces, up or down is what you see reflected on websites, and what my scale kind of gave me was 6 ounces. So that's what we're going to call it. Now, I want to do one quick size comparison because this is a really common knife and they're literally exactly the same size, okay? So this is the Kershaw Cryo, this is the Zero Tolerance 0350. They are literally the same size. Now, one thing that's frustrating, and I said this in the review of the Cryo, there's a lot of weight here for what you get, okay? This knife weighs almost as much as this knife, and this knife, you know, you're getting more cutting edge, you're getting a stouter blade, you're getting more grippy handles. There's a lot going on here that makes it superior to this, and they weigh the same. So in terms of how much weight you got to carry, you know, it doesn't seem like a very good trade-off, and that was one of the things that I didn't like about the Cryo. Now, I wanted to do the size comparison because they are literally the same size, okay? So that gives you a really good idea of what you're dealing with for size on this knife. By the way, the Zero Tolerance is also more comfortable in hand because the handle is bigger, considerably bigger than that of the Cryo. Now, we've kind of given you a good sense of the whole thing. Say, okay, 7 3/4, 3 1/4, 4 1/2. That kind of gives you the main numbers you care about. Now, I will say, this dimension is quite big, and that's typical of any Zero Tolerance. You've got a good 1.5 inches here. And I think if you're watching this and you know anything about Zero Tolerances, they're all quite hefty, both in hand and in carry. They're made to be tough, hard use knives, and I don't think this one is any exception to that, even though it's the smallest of the sort of bunch. All right, let's get on to the blade after we've gotten size and weight out of the way. Oh, one more thing that pertains to weight. These are full stainless steel liners, and they are not milled at all, okay? So no milling of any kind inside of that knife. Now let's go on to the blade. The blade here is S30V. It's a nice hefty chunk of S30V. It carries a lot of its full width right out to the end, and I'm going to just show you with my finger because I know this will be hard to see on camera. Actually, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. I'll move just off to the one side. There we go, that should be close enough. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Now, I'm going to turn this way and show you with my finger. The full width of this knife handle this knife blade goes all the way to here. Okay, so only the little bit here that's sticking past my finger is a thinner profile, and you can see there's not much there past my finger. So great blade design for carrying a lot of steel near the end and giving you a lot of strength and a lot of durability to that tip. And if you've ever watched one of Jankerson's videos, the 0300 has the same blade shape, and it did really well on his tip testing where he just jams into a piece of wood and breaks it off, breaks the piece of wood off, not the blade. he's seeing how strong the tip is, and the 0300 performed very well in that test. And this would be the same thing. And I've seen lots of guys do bushcrafting with this knife and have a lot of success. This, of course, is the Tiger Stripe version. So the way they do that, and this is key for any knife, the best coating is a DLC coating. I wish some other companies, such as Benchmade and Cold Steel, would forget the sprayed on, painted on coatings, especially at the price point for some of their knives. It ought to be a DLC, and it's kind of frustrating that it isn't. This, however, is a DLC coating, and then they sandblast some of that DLC coating off to get the stripe effect. So it's a really, really durable coating, and you can have some confidence. It's nice to have a decorative coating like that, but I think many of us go, well, how long is it going to last? Well, on this knife, it's going to last a long time, which is a real benefit. All right, it is S30V, and it holds an edge extremely well. The other day, I took a box that was, 1 foot by 1 foot box, sort of, and I cut that thing to ribbons, so that there was not a piece bigger than a postage stamp left. And when I was all done, this thing would still cut hair. So edge holding is exceptional on this knife, and partially that's because of S30V steel being great steel, but I think the edge geometry also contributes. High flat grind here. There's a lot of blades, so this is a high flat grind as far as I'm concerned, because if you compared it to other knives with a high flat grind, it would actually be thinner and longer because the blade width is so much. All right. There is a swedge here on the top, and it may be a little hard to see because of the painted coating, or I mean because of the DLC coating. And there's this nice cutout here for your thumb that I found I used an awful lot, so that you can choke up on the knife in that manner. Okay, so very good blade for all kinds of EDC tasks. Now, the one thing that I found as a limitation is because of the short, fat design of this blade, it's not a great penetrating blade. So I did some tests just trying to start from nothing and push it into some cardboard or some different materials, and I found that it's very hard to push into different materials, especially if you compare it to something like an Aegis or a Paramilitary 2, or even a 0200, which is a very similar blade shape, but you can see how the 0200 is much longer and leaner. And I do prefer this blade shape just a little bit. I'll pull that back in when I talk about competitive options here in a second. Now, I think I've covered everything that matters in regards to the blade. Edge holding capability was good. Toughness is excellent. Let's talk about deployment and lockup. So this comes as assisted, but it's been de-assisted by the owner. Now, I've used it both ways. When he first got it, I was playing with it a little bit when it was assisted, and I actually like it both ways. I really can't complain. If this knife was never assisted, and you just gave it to me and I used it, I say, hey, this is a great knife. Having used it assisted, I would also say that's a great knife too. I really like both. Now, because of that, if I owned it, I would just leave it assisted, because I do like it assisted. He wasn't crazy about it, so he de-assisted it, which is great. It's still an awesome knife. And I really like deployment is perfect in both configurations. It's a very smooth, well-built knife, so you're not losing anything like you maybe would with other assisted knives. It still opens really nice and works really, really well. Now, lockup is a liner lock, and it is a very thick liner lock. By far the thickest that I've seen. Of course, it's the same thickness as the liner lock on the 0200. So that tells you something, because this is a much smaller, lighter knife, and you're getting liners that are just as thick. So that's pretty cool. Tells you that the philosophy behind this was to build a hard use, tough folding knife, and I think they've done that. And so lockup is very, very solid, very good. There's no blade play of any kind. You wouldn't expect that from a zero tolerance anyway, but it is a liner lock. However, I need to, the thickness of these liners are as thick as some stainless steel frame locks I've seen. Almost as thick as the Kershaw Cryo, which is stainless steel. And so this is a frame lock, but this liner is nearly as thick as the stainless steel frame on this knife. So it's a very, very, very strong lock. Going into the handle, oh, by the way, it's bronze phosphor bushings, which again you would kind of expect on a knife at this price point. Handle is G10 on stainless steel liners, back spacer, not pillar construction, and jimping, good jimping, functional jimping in all the right places. A nice deep finger choil here to keep you from going up onto that blade if you were doing some kind of hard cutting task. Now, here's one of my issues with the blade. Notice that I've got no pommel coming through. If I switch to more of a hammer grip, I can get a little pommel through, but this handle is a little small for me. So if you have large hands, you may find this handle just a little uncomfortable because it's fairly short. Now it is quite thick, and it does fill the part of your hand that's on it is very filled, and that's really nice. And so on that side of the equation, you know, you've got this weird combination where for me it's a little short. For most people it would probably be fine, but it is very hand filling and generally speaking very comfortable. I did do a fair bit of cutting with this and I didn't have any issues. I don't feel like there's any hot spots or anything like that. And of course there are lots of other videos out there where you can see people really working on this knife and not having any real issues. Okay, so comfortable handle, just a little small for my purposes. Also equally comfortable in reverse grip. Now keep in mind that I didn't find this blade to be exceptional at any kind of, you know, penetration type of cut, and so if you're going to use it in a reverse grip, generally that's the kind of cut you're doing. I didn't find that this blade very suited to that kind of a cut. All right, so that's the handle. Very good, very comfortable handle. By the way, the clip is not a deep carry clip, but it carries well enough. There you go. I'll put my finger there so you can expect material to land right about there. So you got about this much knife showing out of your pocket if you're carrying this knife. It is very easy to carry, comfortable to carry, and that clip is four-way repositionable. So you can put it wherever you want. There is a lanyard hole. It's a little small, but you could probably work 550 cord through there if you put some effort into it. Now, I want to do something that I don't normally do because although I really like a lot of things about this knife, it's not really for me. It may be for you, but I want to tell you why, and I'm going to back up just a little bit to tell you that. All right, so here's the 0350, you know, 7 3/4 inches, about 6 ounces. Here's the 0200, and it is about 7.5 ounces, so good, much heavier. Price point is almost exactly the same, but I feel like you're getting, for me, a more comfortable, more usable knife in this version, and they're running very close in price, especially if you shop around. You know, this guy is landing around around $120 to $150. This thing is between $120 to $160. So the top end prices are a little more for this. But if you shop around, you can pick these up for like $130, $120, and that's brand new. You go to the secondary market, you can find these for less than $100. Now the same is true of this one. But the point is, very similar price point, but I feel like for my money, this is the knife I'm going to go with if I want a hard use knife. Okay? Now, if you say, that's okay, I don't need a knife that's that hard use, then for the same money, you could do a Paramilitary 2, which is not as hard use. Granted, this is not as tough as this. However, it is a very capable EDC, and because of the strength of the compression lock, which is a genius lock, it's going to be very similar in terms of lock strength. Now, the blade is definitely finer, okay, and suited for different kinds of cutting tasks. Both great EDC knives. This one's going to penetrate far better, of course. This one only weighs like 3.8 ounces. So almost twice as much weight for about the same amount of blade, same blade steel, same handle material, and not as comfortable a handle for me. Now, the Paramilitary 2 is kind of famous for its ergonomics. This guy doesn't quite get to the same level of comfort for my hand, again. So I wanted to share those competitive options with you by way of explanation. I like this knife, but I'm not going to be buying one, mostly for the reasons I just gave you. I feel like there are knives that do the same thing a little better for about the same price that I would prefer. Okay, overall, I found this to be a great knife. Great for, now here's the place where I would say this knife comes in. Let's say you want to carry this knife, but you go, I just can't. It's too heavy, it's too big, whatever. I work in an office. This is not a threatening knife nearly as much as this one. This is an easier to carry knife. And so you go, yeah, I like the 0200. I want the hard use capability, but I want it in a smaller package. There you go. The 0350 perfectly suits that. I would say because of its kind of design being kind of short and fat, thick blade, you could probably, this is not to me a threatening knife in any way. You know, I would feel comfortable pulling this out in an office environment or at a movie theater to open my candy up, whatever. I don't find it's too problematic along those lines. It's pretty people friendly. So how would I use this knife? I don't see this as so much of a combat knife. I do see it very much as an EDC knife. Bushcraft, it's going to do very, very well. I did a bunch of wood cutting with this knife, whittling, made some feather sticks, even shaved off some small kindling, and it worked extremely well for that. EDC tasks, again, it's going to do well. Edge holding capability is fantastic. So there's lots of good things that you can do with this knife. Now here's one that I don't normally think of, but I definitely do with this knife. Notice how this edge drops very abruptly, and the point is moved kind of down. I would say this would be a very good rescue knife. There is a point, but the point is kind of turned down so that you can easily, let's imagine this is a piece of my stomach and you've got to cut my clothing. Well, you can easily run this knife along here without having any risk of jamming that point into my hand. That is not true of, say, the Para 2, right? Try it now. Yeah, there's a great risk that you're going to cut me doing that, okay? So I see this as a real rescue knife. You know, you could get this in between a person and a seatbelt or a person and a piece of clothing or something else, a piece of rope, whatever, very easily, and that point is very manageable because of that little drop. And I would say the 300, which you know is going to be reviewed here eventually, would be the same type of use. So I don't normally say that, but I think this would be a very good rescue knife as well as all of the other uses that I mentioned there a second ago. So overall, great little knife, a little too small for me, but probably a lot of you will totally love it. And I do like it, and I certainly enjoyed getting to use it for a week or so, and I carried it a lot and had a lot of fun with it. I do recommend this knife if those things that I mentioned, you know, describe you. If you want a really hard use knife in a fairly small package, excellent, excellent option. Okay, high-end materials, tough as nails, very good blade. That's my take on the Zero Tolerance 0350. Really like this knife. No wonder it's very popular for zero tolerance. And I will talk to you later, YouTube.